Welcome to Politics News Wolf US channel. Russia's invasion of Ukraine brought to light how important the conventional world order is. If we take a look at the situations in the international arena so far, we can clearly see how big and global crisis Russian leader Vladimir Putin has caused. In this war, President Putin tried to lure Chinese leader Xi Jinping to his side in order to spread his invasion plans to much wider borders than Eastern Europe. However, the US, which has the most important military power in the world, responded to this situation with a harsh attitude. The Washington administration has taught the whole world that the right to independent life of both Ukraine and China, especially Taiwan, which is currently claiming sovereignty, should be respected. Accompanying these efforts by Washington, the U.S. 7th Fleet and other military forces conducted worldwide military exercises, such as the Bali Takan, involving 17,000 personnel in partnership with the Philippines. China's close attitude towards Russia on the Ukraine war and its aggressiveness on Taiwan also mobilized the U.S. Navy forces. Under the leadership of President Joe Biden, the Washington administration took action not to allow Russia to establish an empire of pressure on the world, and to prevent China from escalating tensions in the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. Navy forces, which has 11 aircraft carriers, conducted military exercises for security purposes in critical areas, such as the Indo-Pacific, Arctic Ocean, Sea of Japan. With more than 17,000 personnel from the USA and the Philippines, the military exercise named Balikatan was one of the most vocal ultimatums of the U.S. Navy against China and Russia. In addition, the U.S. and Japanese naval forces held joint exercises in the East Sea. The nuclear-powered USS Abraham Lincoln from the 7th Fleet, and the guided rocket cruisers and MSDF destroyers, JS Congo and JS Inajima, participated in the exercise. In addition, after these exercises, Japan began to accelerate its cooperation processes with Washington, in order to put its military power, in a deterrent form, with the support of the USA, in the face of China's rising regional and global role. Russia, on the other hand, conducted military exercises in the Sea of Japan against these efforts of the USA. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the exercise was held in the Sea of Japan. In the exercise, the Caliber missile was used with submarines of the Pacific Fleet against these dangerous attempts of the Russian Navy. Despite the joint action of Beijing and Moscow, South Korea, which did not leave the USA and Japan alone, started to take surprising steps. In fact, it was clear that such steps would come after South Korean leader Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the United States. Because, while the Beijing administration argued that the decision of Washington and Seoul to send the U.S. nuclear submarine to the Korean peninsula would harm regional peace and stability, it protested the call for the preservation of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. However, after meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden and other Washington officials during his 6-day visit that started on April 24, South Korean leader Yoon did not break his determined stance. When we look at today, with the rapprochement of Washington and Seoul, critical moments began for China. While South Korea, Japan, and the USA are forming stronger alliances, the fact that the Chinese army is on high alert continues to shake the world agenda at the moment. According to the Chinese media, the warming relations between the aforementioned countries have seriously cooled Beijing in these areas. The official spokesman for the Chinese military warned that China should be on high alert as South Korea, Japan, and the United States forge stronger military and intelligence sharing ties. The alarm bell that went off in the Chinese army came after the escalation in the U.S. joint exercises with its two Asian allies and the meltdown in Seoul's relations with Tokyo, which saw Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Jun Suk-ho. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida had wrapped up a two-day visit to Seoul as a sign of a dissolution in their long tense relations. It's a kind of, well, if it's amending some of the Constitution's regulations. There's a national treaty called the Creative Freedom Made in Hong Kong. That's an American trademark. It has to do a lot more than just maybe an administrative thing. But it should be something that belongs in the country. Blocked security in Northeast Asia will pull China seriously from these areas. In order to confuse the Beijing government, they claim that this alliance would increase tensions and trigger an arms race. Liu Zhongyang, Beijing's expert on regional affairs, said it remains to be seen how long the rapprochement between Japan and South Korea will last. But the close military and security ties with the United States are deeply worrying. Meanwhile, the turning point between Japan and South Korea that has shaken Beijing for fears it's making a strategic turn towards Washington to curb the ambitions of its regional neighbors has been welcomed in Europe and the United States. Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Kishida's two-day visit to Seoul was a serious step towards redressing the victims of forced labor during Japan's colonial rule. On the Korean Peninsula, from 1910 to 1945, it also marked the resurgence of shuttle diplomacy between the two countries after a 12-year hiatus following an agreement proposed by Korea. The two leaders stressed that historical differences should not hinder deeper cooperation to confront growing regional security challenges. Also, Fumio Kishida and Yoon Suk-yeol talked about the pace at which their ties are strengthening and the progress in negotiations for faster exchange of information on North Korean missile tests. Also, Mr. Yoon and Mr. Kishida are expected to hold tripartite talks with U.S. President Joe Biden on the sidelines of the Group of Seven meetings in Hiroshima later this month to discuss regional instability. Amid the increasingly assertive foreign policy of North Korea and China. After all this, China's foreign ministry recently urged the two capitals to seek closer ties with Beijing. As you can see, hot and tense times had begun for Beijing. As close neighbors, China, Japan, and South Korea are necessary to maintain the political basis of bilateral relations, and to commit to the stable, healthy, and sustainable development of tripartite cooperation, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin stressed. Chinese officials, including Beijing's ambassador to Seoul, Xing Haiming, have expressed their support for the resumption of the three-day leadership meeting, which has been suspended since December 2019 amid a dispute by Japan over compensation for Korea's colonial use of forced labor. On the other hand, Chinese state media reacted sharply to Seoul after President Yoon's last official visit to the United States to discuss deep nuclear cooperation. Chinese media accused Yoon of blindly following the United States and bowing to Japan to please Washington. Although South Korea is wary of upsetting its biggest trading partner, it has taken a tougher approach to China under Yoon. Analysts stressed that warming South Korea-Japan ties have chilled China over the potential return of the United States. It is expected that the proximity between Seoul and Tokyo could hinder Beijing's bilateral and tripartite ties with countries. Stronger tripartite cooperation with the United States, along with the return of shuttle diplomacy and regular visits, will undoubtedly contribute to the coordination and calibrating of all three countries' approaches to common regional and global concerns. Japan said in March that it would expand restrictions on exports of 23 types of China's leading chip manufacturing technology, despite trade officials repeatedly saying it wasn't targeting China. Yoon has been a supporter of Washington's Asia strategy, particularly ahead of his visit to the White House last month, including U.S. President Joe Biden's attempt to restructure global supply chains to reduce reliance on China. In short, both countries have now laid the foundations of a strong alliance in cooperation with the United States. Alongside all these steps, NATO is reportedly planning to open a liaison office in Tokyo, the capital of Japan, for military and strategic coordination with the US-led alliance's close partners in the Indo-Pacific, such as Australia, South Korea, and New Zealand. This altitude office will be the first of its kind in Asia, and will allow the US-led military allowance to hold periodic consultations with key partners such as Japan and Australia. Beijing had previously warned against expanding NATO to the Asia-Pacific, but the Chinese government has so far not reacted to this altitude office decision. In its strategic concept, published on this issue, NATO argued that China poses systemic challenges to Euro-Atlantic security. In fact, these statements of NATO were the most concrete examples of the firm and determined stance against these threats that China was trying to create. In summary, all these data show that the world's countries and international organizations are currently opposing the roles played by China in its war against Ukraine. Thank you for watching the video. We value your opinion. Please comment, share them with us, and thank you so much once again for watching this video. See you in my next video.